evening all, and welcome to the July 26th, 6 p.m. Indian River School District Business Meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and if you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, as led by former Marine, current Marine, Sean Frost.
Join me in pledging allegiance to the greatest nation in the world. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. At this time, we'd like to call for the adoption of the orders of the day. I ask if any board members, if they have any items they wish to move from consent agenda to discussion or any other changes. Mr. Searcy.
Like consent item J for discussion.
Consent item
Or
J.
action for discussion, I guess.
Any others? All right. I'd like to call for a motion for the orders of the day as amended.
Move approval.
Thank you, Ms. Jimenez. Thank you, Mr. McCain. Any discussion?
I just want to highlight a couple items on the consent agenda. I'd like to congratulate Vero Beach High School.
Oh, this was just for the orders of the day.
I'm sorry.
But that sounds good so far. All those in favor? Aye. Do we have any presentations, Dr. Rendell?
No, ma'am, we do not.
All right. At this time, we have citizen input. I do have one from Mr. Brian Bender. If you'd like to come on up, thank you.
Apologize in advance as I try to read this quickly within the 3-minute time frame, but hello to the members of the board, Dr. Rendell, and those in attendance. My name is Brian Bender, and as many of you may know, I'm an employee of the school district. But tonight, more importantly, I am also a parent of 3 children in the school system. While I realize that the majority of student success is measured in numbers such as benchmarks, FSA, EOCs, school grades, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, student success can be measured without numbers. As I mentioned, I currently have 3 children in Indian River County schools. The 2 youngest, Shane and Katie, currently attend Citrus Elementary, and their older sister Maggie just graduated from Citrus this past year. My daughter Maggie has significant learning disabilities, and every day can be a struggle for her. She also has some developmental disabilities and exhaustion issues which affect her learning as well. Even with these issues, we are fortunate that Maggie loves attending school, and her love of school can certainly be attributed to the environment she has experienced at Citrus. For the past 2 years, Maggie has had an excellent team of classroom teachers, ESE teacher assistants, the staff in general, and the administration all working toward a goal of helping her succeed. I'd like to share the names of some of the team members that all had a part in creating such a positive learning environment for Maggie. Julie Dean and Laura Clement, Maggie's 4th and 5th grade teachers. Their levels of patience and understanding shown by these ladies is amazing. Jason McLaughlin, also known as Mr. J, was Maggie's exceptional education teacher, always pushing Maggie to do her best and not give up even when her frustration would set in. Molly Somm, her speech pathologist. Early on, Maggie had a difficult time warming up to new teachers, but Molly was immediately able to find common ground with Maggie. They both have very curly hair, and that was all it took for Maggie to open up to her. Rachel Swallow, she was an excellent ESE teacher assistant, and I believe now she is going to VBE as a full ESE teacher, and they will be lucky to have her. Jack Neville, sign language interpreter. There was a hearing impaired student in some of Maggie's classes, and Mr. Neville taught Maggie a lot of sign language, and he always made sure she was drinking her bottle of water. Nikki Del Tufo, also called Coach D. I've never seen another person so swarmed by students as when she would walk around on campus. They absolutely love her. Christine Cook is a resource specialist at Citrus, and Randy Hunt, the district program specialist, always available for questions and advice whenever I had any issues. While Maggie's test scores and report cards may struggle to reflect great success, my wife and I consider her continued love of learning, even with the difficulties she has, to be a tremendous success. And that is a testament to the work and dedication of many people around the district, only some of whom I was able to mention in this session. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Appreciate that. Now we're at the consent agenda. I would like to call for a motion which will include the adoption of the orders of the day, removing item J. I have-
No approval of the consent agenda, removing item J to action.
Thank you, Mr. McCain.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Frost. We're going to have discussion. Mr. McCain?
No, thank you.
Mr. Frost?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Jimenez?
I did jump the gun there. I just wanted to congratulate Vero Beach High School. They're going to be going to Austria in May to participate in the American Celebration of Music. It's a testament to the excellence of our music programs here in Indian River County. And as we move forward with the budget and with the referendum, I'd like to remind you that those dollars that you, the taxpayers, contribute allow for us to work with students in this manner. I also wanted to highlight that we are approving the Adult Education and Family Literacy Grant. It's a program that allows second language learners in our community to get support, and there's also support for their children during that program. So, you know, I just think it's important to highlight some of these things that happen behind the scenes that are not just academic in nature, because our school district is working to really make sure that we are dealing with the whole child and supporting families as well. So, thank you,
Thank you so
Madam
much.
Chair.
Any further? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? 5-0, Ms. Stang. I believe Dr. Rendell would like to recognize some people.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board members, by your action tonight and by your action at a previous board meeting, you have appointed 6 new assistant principals. So I'd like to take the time to introduce you to them, or introduce them to you and our community. First, if Chad Bacon could stand. Chad is going to be at Sebastian Elementary School as an assistant principal. He's coming to us most recently from St. Lucie County as a high school assistant principal. But he has experience teaching at the younger grades, and he has a bachelor's, master's, and an educational doctorate degree. So welcome, Chad. Second, our own Chris Cummings, if he could stand. Chris is joining Oslo Middle School as an assistant principal, but most recently he has been teaching at Fellsmere Elementary. He's one of our best teachers, so a loss in the classroom, but a gain in the administrative ranks. He, of course, has a bachelor's and a master's degree, and he's one of our own, so congratulations and welcome, Chris. Michelle Holmes at Sebastian River High School, currently a teacher at Sebastian. Currently a teacher at Sebastian, but now moving to the administrative ranks, a lot of experience there, and one of the staff, so she'll be welcomed in her new role as an administrator. I know Mr. Racine already has lots of things planned for her to do, so welcome, Michelle, congratulations. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. James Mons. James, if you could stand up. James is going to be joining the staff at Gifford Middle School as an assistant principal. He's most recently been working in Martin County, I believe. Oh, all the way, that's right, that far south in Broward County. Yes, but local St. Lucie County graduate from years ago. Great family down there, so welcome, James. And last to be introduced tonight is oh, not last, actually, we've got 2 more. Mr. Timmer, James Timmer, if he could stand. So James is joining the staff at Sebastian River Middle School as an assistant principal. He's worked in our district for several years, most recently just across the street at Storm Grove Middle School as an accomplished teacher there. I know my daughter had him for a teacher this year, so we're glad that he can get promoted till now. But congratulations to James, and good luck at Sebastian River Middle. And the last assistant principal to introduce you to tonight, Jackie Contry, if Jackie could stand. She is currently a teacher at Sebastian River Middle School, is already there doing great work, but she's moving into the ranks of assistant principal. So I know that Ms. Idolette was really excited that both of you are joining the team, so congratulations. I don't want to forget that we do have one of our newest district leaders in her spot now in the bullpen is Pam Dampier as the new Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. So welcome to the team.
Great, thank you so much. Now we'll return to the removed item J, the approval of the agreement between the East Coast Technical Assistance Center. Mr. Searcy.
I just have a kind of a general question. We spend $12,000 a year on this program. We've been members of this thing for, since 1999. How are we measuring the success of the $12,000 we're spending?
Ms. Stampier, you were going to ask some of your staff about this program. Can you speak to that, or do you have Ms., if Lillian can speak to it? The ECTAC agreement. Yeah, Karen was going to speak to it.
I don't have that answer, but I will research it and get back with you.
So should we table it?
So we just, if we vote for it, we just approve the $12,000 and we don't really know the details or how successful the programs have been. Is that correct, Mr. Superintendent?
It's a renewal. It's an agreement that we've been engaged in with the ECTAC Center for several years. Several others, local school boards do as well. I have to give you further research on the effectiveness of the program.
Would you like to, you're certainly welcome to make a motion to
Postpone?
postpone to the next meeting, I would say, would be.
I just vote against it, that's okay. I just, you know, we as a board decided last year to discontinue our membership with the School Board Association because we couldn't see the benefits of that particular project. And if you can't tell me the benefits of this one, I have a hard time voting for it. Just because we've been a member of it since 1999 doesn't make it work. And, I mean, it sounds like it's in the right area of doing good things and Title I and all of that, but it doesn't say anything to me except we're just renewing our membership, and I can't support that.
I would certainly support your motion with a second, Mr. Searcy, if you'd like to if you want to make a motion, so, for further information.
I'll move.
Thank you.
Yes, I move to postpone this until we have an opportunity for staff to present us with the ways in which this is measured as far as return on investment.
Sure, and I'll second that motion. Any further discussion?
All right,
I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, I would just, yeah, I've got just a point of question. Just, is there going to be any harm to any
Right.
programmatic things going on at school? Is something going to be late starting that schools are depending on?
No, because we'll have the information ready for you at the next board meeting, which we do have a board meeting next week,
And there's
1
no-
week from today.
Okay.
On the 2nd,
Yes,
August?
sir.
Great, appreciate that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much. Action item A, approval to award the RFP 2016-18 to Proctor Construction Company, LLC, for new cafeteria and classroom building addition at Beachland Elementary. Dr. Rendell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With action item A, we're seeking approval to award the RFP for the Beachland Elementary project in the amount of $7,019,000, $7,019,424.30. Mr. Morrison, could you review the bid process for this project, or have Mr. Carver review it for us?
Thank you very much, Dr. Rendell. Board members, I'm going to ask Mr. Jeff Carver, our new Director of Purchasing, to come to the podium to describe the process that we have gone through to arrive at the result of the recommended award that's before you tonight. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. The recommendation that's before you tonight is the results of a process. And if I may, I'd like to tell you about the process from start to finish and talk about some of the different criteria and how that's established and how it's evaluated. So on May 16th, the district released a request for proposal for this project. The award was going to be based 30% on price. Price has to be the criteria that holds the most weight because this is not a CM at risk project. So we released the plans, we released the specifications, we had a pre-bid conference, and then there was a series of addendums that were the results of questions by potential bidders. Those were released. The proposals were received, And prior to distribution to the evaluation committee that was designated, the purchasing department goes through each of those packets. We make sure that none of the vendors or contractors are debarred. We make sure that they have the proper licensing, the proper insurance, the proper bonding. And then once we determine that those proposals are not fatally flawed in any way, then I distribute those proposals to the identified evaluation team for the project. And I give them instructions. They evaluate those submittals individually. They're given very detailed, specific instructions about the rules that apply to their role as an evaluation committee member. They're asked to sign a conflict of interest document so that it confirms that they have no relationship in any way to any of the contractors. Those are all things that we're required to maintain in a file in the purchasing department. And then the scores, the individual scores, are calculated and they're illustrated on the attachment. They're aggregated, and the recommendation that's before you tonight is to the vendor that had the highest aggregate score based on the criteria that we included in the bid document when we put it out on the street.
I have one question. How many people sat on your committee?
There were 3 people on the evaluation committee. I used their initials, but it's Scott Sanders, Patrick Murray.
Just
Okay.
really.
All right.
Thank you, Ms. Jimenez.
Yes, I have a question. Can you tell us a little bit about the adverse audit findings for the selected group? Because I think that is a great example of follow-through on the issues we've had with overcharging.
So how we addressed and how we asked the potential bidders to respond to the attestation element of the scoring criteria, we asked for them to tell us yes or no if they've had findings, and if yes, they had to provide us with details of those findings, and so that we could quantify them as a committee. And for the one firm, Proctor, the one that's being recommended, they did have findings, and I don't remember the exact number, but they had paid everything back at the end. There was no delay in that firm's desire to correct that. So.
And the points were just, you know, and yet they still, through finding, became the, lead bid holder, even with that. So
Well, they had-
it shows our process. I think what we're pointing out is, before you came, this was the process, and I think it's been put into place, and it just shows the fairness, I think, that we're just trying to display.
Price for this proposal was going to be the driving factor, and they were the low bidder. And so the price is one of the objective criteria on there. You can actually mathematically figure out what the difference in the point value is, and that's what you see there. All of the graders scored all of the vendors individually exactly the same, because I gave them that number. It's a mathematical number, so there really isn't no subjectivity with grading that area.
And just as a follow-up, I think that the point is that because we've had issues with this company in particular in the past, that we put in policy around attestation, and the point is that we are following through and we're being fair in the process. They're not just being dinged because of the audit. Their price was favorable compared to the second runner-up, because there was only a 2-point difference, 283 to 285. So I just thought, for folks that are concerned with the accountability, we are holding these companies accountable. So thank you very much.
Mr. Frost?
Thank you. I thought Dr. Rendell was messing with me when I saw this first, because I looked at it and I thought, oh, my Facebook and Twitter and inbox are going to blow up. But the board members have done a good job of explaining the process and how there actually was a points deduction for past attestation issues. You did mention that they're the low price bidder, and you know, one of the things that Dr. Rendell helped me understand is that this is a and no more fixed. They can't charge us a penny more than what's here, so we're not going to see that they're the low bidder, and then with all of the change orders or add-ons that we're going to see an inflation in the cost of this building. Is that accurate?
The recommendation includes a 5% contingency for things that the plans may not have thoroughly addressed. So I think that the facilities division is going to hold the awarded contractor to that price, but understand that with a construction project this big, there's going to likely be things that the plans and the engineers left out that are going to have to be addressed. There's unknowns.
Or a pipe or something.
Right, but that's all contemplated in the 5% holdback, so it'd be roughly 7.4 total.
Correct.
End of project and no more. Just making sure that we're not awarding contracts, you know, on a 2-point differential, and then seeing the project grow beyond, you know, to what would be more, you know, what another estimator has deemed to be a more realistic market cost for that building.
During the process, there was 6 addendums released to address things within the design specifications that weren't necessarily clear. So after that many, going back to the drawings that many times, I feel pretty confident that the numbers and the bids were based on what our expectation is at the end of the project.
But I do want to clarify, I know you want to speak, but I do want to clarify, if we have a change order, not
Right,
them.
right.
You know, that's the only thing that you can't guarantee. Ms. Jimenez?
Oh, you wanted stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, that 7 million includes the contingency. It's not 7
Correct.
million and, it includes it already.
Oh, right.
Correct.
Yeah,
right.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Morrison, if you could give us a definition of the hard bid.
In a crude way, the architect produces the plans and passes that on to the contractors and says how much. That's the layman's terms of describing a hard bid. It is primarily based on price. This is not a CM at risk, in which we have had some issues of the overpayment. This is mostly price driven. The lowest price will carry the most weight. Yes, sir.
Mr. Searcy?
This adverse audit finding, is that a new category that you put in just because this contractor has had problems with us?
No,
I've never seen that before, but
I'll jump forward. That was the board, not only this, but also I was going to, when you're done, have Mr. Morrison explain the attestation that we had decided if it was over $10,000, and I'll let Mr. Morrison give that formal, but we put that in. I think he's just,
It was a mandate that we added that criteria.
Yeah, per board direction, we added that as part of our process.
and how did we decide that it was going to be 5 points? I mean, that's the max, right?
Correct.
How did we decide it was going to be 5 points?
I actually had a conversation with Ms. DeAgressa, and we talked about it. I don't remember exactly how we arrived at it or what our rationale was, but as a procurement professional, I think that's a reasonable score for that.
My recollection on the overcharges were like almost $300,000 by this contractor on several different projects. And I'm glad we have the category in there for adverse audit findings, but when you've got a contractor that overcharges you on several different jobs, and it's a local contractor, I just have a real hard time approving that, even though the price is lower by, I forgot how much it is,
$30,000.
$30,000. And the score was only 2 points off. I have a
was
real
7
hard time
points.
with that.
with the ding.
That was 2 points.
No,
It
2
was
points after.
285.
No, I know, but he also took another 5 points off. He was at 2, what was the thing?
No,
Add
the
5
bottom,
to that.
285 is the aggregate
that's-
score,
that's
including
the
the deduct.
Yeah, but if we didn't have that category of -5, he would have been, do you know what I'm saying? That's all I was, just that,
Right,
yeah.
Right, and I, I think Mr. Searcy makes a good point, because I agree that, I was surprised that they were given the award. I feel that that is too low, given what has happened. But, we don't determine what the points are. And I think it's unfortunate that there wasn't some conversation about what would be reflective of, there should be some kind of gradation, because doing it for a lot of different contracts, but that's neither here nor there. I was surprised that it was so close, and with an audit finding, they still got it,
And-
for a delta of $30,000.
If I may, board members, when I talked about the beginning of the process, when I go through to make sure that none of the bidders are fatally flawed, this is a vendor that had never been, there had never been any action taken to prohibit them from bidding. So at this juncture, they have to be given consideration.
And I do want to jump in, the points, however low or whatever that point system, when they make that the scope of work and this is their point system, without having response, this is what the point system is. So I think it was great that you brought out, and Mr. Susi, I understand your concerns as well, because that happened to be someone, but the board saw, whether it was a particular vendor or multiple vendors, I think what we did, which I did want Mr. Morrison, if you have that actual, not only is there on the front end cautionary for someone who has had a finding, whether it was the vendor that we found findings with, or those other people who didn't have jobs with could have had the -5. But on the back end, to prevent a further attestation problem, Mr. Morrison, can you explain the board's policy change
Sure.
for the back end protection?
Just to clarify that we're talking about essentially a hard bid tonight. However, under a construction management at risk project, we have inserted into the contract that our process, and we feel that it's a best practice, that we send in the auditors to make sure that we were charged properly. And should, in case the auditors find any funds that are due back to the district in excess of $10,000, not only does the contractor have to return those dollars to the school district, but also pay for the cost of the attestation that the auditors conduct. But just want to be clear that we're talking about a hard bid tonight versus a construction management at risk, which is not
Sure.
tonight.
But I think I wanted that explained because the board saw a area that we needed to improve on, and we took actions. And so even though it was whatever, he could have put 10 points, if, but without knowing who's bidding and their history, there could have been, so I think it was a fair process. Nothing particular to the vendor that we've had some problems with. And so I know you're a professional and new to the district, so you were looking at it with a clear point system, fairness, this is their policy, we're going to make sure there's points, and we have no way to knowing how that could have turned out, or that it would have turned out that close, because they, until they opened the bid, none of the other vendors knew what the other one was bidding. It could have been a bigger difference. So, since this is a price-driven contract.
And I think it's important to make that distinction between it being a CMAR or a hard bid, so
Thank you.
that clarifies it further.
Mr. Susi?
Have we figured out how, when the contractor submits his invoice for the monthly charges or whatever, have we figured out who is going to analyze that to make sure that the scope of work that's been completed is being properly paid? Is responsible. Is that who's responsible, or are you responsible, or who is?
I think I'm going to let Mr. Morrison address that. I know how they did it in Martin County, but it may be different here, so I'll let him address that.
You're correct, Mr. Searcy. Primarily, when you see the AIA document, which is the construction draw document, you will see the architect and sign off on that the scope of work that is being billed for has been completed. Where we've run into the issues on the CMAR is interpretive language, and I referred to, for example, the last one, where we had an issue of software costs. That contractor felt that the contract allowed them to charge us for software costs, all overhead costs. We said absolutely not. We feel that the only software we should be paying for is as a direct result of this specific project that we were doing. So we're working to clean up the language and make it more clear on what we're paying for versus not what we're not paying for. And in addition, we have the penalty clause that has been inserted into the contract. But to answer your question, it is mainly the architect who signs off to say that this scope of work has been completed.
Any
Just
further-
a quick calculation I did over here on my phone, that it's a $30,000, I'm not texting. It's $30,000 is roughly 0.4%. So the difference in cost between the two vendors, if one were to receive, if the selected vendor were to receive a 10-point, we would only be paying 0.4%, but we have in place a 5-point penalty, and maybe that's something the board should consider, or,
Do we have a motion on the table yet?
I don't think so.
I move approval.
Second.
Mr. McCain, do you have any further discussion on
No,
your,
thank you.
Ms. Jimenez?
thank you.
Are we all good? Thank you so much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
4-1, Ms. Stang. Item B, approval of owner-contractor construction agreement for new cafeteria and classroom, addition Beachland Elementary. Dr. Rendell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item B actually goes along with item A. Item B is seeking approval for the construction agreement to Proctor Construction for the Beachland project in the amount of $7,019,424.30. So in
All
other
in-
words, this is the contract to begin the work.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval?
Thank you, Ms. Jimenez.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McCain. Ms. Jimenez?
Thank you. Just to point out that that amount is not the total. The total cost is $7.9 million, and that also includes the almost $600,000 for architect and engineering fees, demolition fees of about $205,000, and then, I don't know what FF&E stands for. I think that's all the furniture and stuff.
Furniture, fixtures, and
$180,500. So the total project is $8 million, and I appreciate the district staff making that distinction so we get the big picture.
Thank you. Mr.
And
Uh,
say something.
Sure. I was going to go to Mr. McCain on a second.
Oh, okay.
Wait, Mr. McCain? Mr. Frost?
Figured out it was going to go. The only thing is, the $600,000 in architectural fees or whatever, one of the things that I've talked with Dr. Rendell about is the possibility of, we're kind of building the same type of school. So why are we redesigning every time for $600,000? If if you're building a type of school, you just make whatever modifications are necessary for that site. So if at Beachland, we needed it on pilings, that's a modification that may be $200,000. But to pay full redesign every time we build a school, I mean, that just seems to me that we could leverage sort of a similar look and feel, and at the same time save money. So that's an opportunity going forward.
So, question, so then what's the follow-up on that? Because this question has been asked before. And so what are we going to do moving forward? Not that we have any major projects coming up.
Maybe it's better to ask why this wouldn't have been done like that.
Well, it's kind of too late.
No, I know, but, and what would he, yeah.
Because that's not the way architects work.
No, it,
Well, and the project is not identical to the other projects that we have done recently. The cafeteria is different than the cafeterias that have been designed recently. The two-story wing is slightly different, I believe, than Fellsmere or any of the other two-story wings that we've done. It's a one-story wing over at Citrus. This is a two-story wing, totally different.
So is that,
Can we make choices to, going forward, to reuse some plans, or at
Yeah,
least?
I've been involved in other districts where we've built the same school design over and over and over.
Well, if you look at Pelican Island, or what is now Osceola,
Right.
They're basically the same school.
Yeah. Liberty 1 and Liberty 2.
Right.
Mr. Morrison, you had a comment on that.
Just some information to offer. When the contract for the architect was approved by the board, I believe Mr. Sanders at that time explained about the DMS curve. There is a statewide Division of Management Services section that architects refer to, which shows you the degree of difficulty in the specific job that you're designing, and the negotiation that took place was based on that model. And Dr. Rendell is exactly right. We try to replicate as much as we can, and we're allowed to do that under statute. I believe we did that at Treasure Coast when we added the wing. Those plans were already drawn up, and we were able to capitalize and save about $80,000 on that project by replicating some of the design. But Beachland is a little unique, and the approval at that time, I believe Mr. Sanders explained to the board the reasoning behind what that cost was at the time.
Mr.
What's the
Searcy?
difference in the classroom building that we're building at Beachland compared to the classroom building that we built at Fellsmere?
That would be more of a question for the architect in terms of the design and the specific features of the building.
But I mean, is it 16 classrooms at both of them, or I don't know.
I guess I'm
I'd have
not
to
qualified
go
to
back and
answer that, but both are 16 classroom wings. However, I can't answer that question. It would have to go back to the architect, but it was board approved.
You already bought it.
No further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? 5-0, Mustang. Item C, approval to award RFQ 2017-01.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In item C, we're seeking approval for continuing contracts for architectural services with Donadio and Associates, Edlin Drittenbass Binkley Architects and Associates, Harvard Jolly Architecture, and Song and Associates. Mr. Morrison, anything to add?
No, sir. Under, well, essentially, yes. Under Florida Statute 287.055, the Competitive Consultant Negotiation Act, we rotate the jobs between the architects as they arise. So this item before you tonight is to ask that these architects be pre-qualified, if you will, and be able to access and design projects for us as they arise. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Thank you, Ms. Jimenez.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McCain. Ms. Jimenez?
No, thank you.
Mr. McCain?
No, thank you.
I would like to ask a question. Could you just give an example of one of the projects, maybe a small and large project for the public, just so they know?
I believe that in the narrative it discusses that small projects are defined as projects with a construction cost is less than $500,000. Escapes me now to give an
I'm
example.
sorry to put you on the
I
spot,
can
but
give
it
you
just
a
didn't.
great
Well, a small-
example is, we discussed earlier today that some of the safety and security improvements that
Correct,
we've made at
okay.
some of our elementary schools are the
Right.
single point of entry. So
Correct, that'd be a good one.
that's a small architectural project. We do have to engage with an architect to redraw the entrance into the school, figure out where to put the new doors, where to close off the wall from, so that's a small project that we've been engaged in several elementary schools, and we've used this process for that.
Thank you. Mr. Frost?
Yes, I'm just wondering if this is something that's roughly $500,000, wouldn't it come before the board at another time? Couldn't it come as the projects come up?
Yes.
So help me understand the need to approve it today.
So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things Mr. Morrison already talked about, but I'm going to talk to you in a little more procurement language. So when you have a project that is small, that's under $500,000, and you're going to hard bid it, and the design fees are going to be less than $200,000, you have to engage with an architect to draw those plans. So to get the job done, it takes two contracts. It takes a contract with the architect, and it takes a contract with whoever the bid awarded contractor is. So that's what this is for. This is for projects that are $0 to $500,000. So like a single point of entry design at one school may only be a $35,000 project, but you still have to have a design firm that you can go to help you with the plans. If you want to do a roof renovation, for example, that may be $150,000 to do that roof, you still have to get an architect to draw the plans so that the contractors know what they're bidding on. And that's what this continuing contract is for. It's so that the district has a pool of sources that they can go to and they can engage in a contract with to provide those design services for those smaller projects. So to answer your question, Mr. Frost, I think the answer is yes, we do need to take action because we do need to have a continuing contract pool of sources for those things that come up.
I think that the confusion is the size of the project of $500,000 is not the price of the architect.
No.
I think that's what the confusion is. We're quoting the size of the project, not the price of the architect. Could you clarify that?
Well, in $500,000 is how the district defines, that's where once it exceeds that, it becomes a large project. But in the statute, where it talks about continuing contracts, it's when design services are going to be not to exceed $200,000. That's what's in 287.055. So you're allowed to have continuing contracts for architectural and engineering services that you can pull from, that you can draw from those sources, as long as the design services are not going to exceed $200,000. If design services are going to exceed $200,000, like the Beachland project, for example, then you'd have to go through the CCNA process to source that engineering firm.
Mr. Fiopolo?
Sure. It sounds to me like we're being asked to approve designs that the board may not fund, to have designs done. I would be more comfortable if the project cap were limited at what the superintendent can spend, because that would make sense. If the superintendent on a $35,000 single point of entry, he can, that's well within his rights. And then if we're asked to also approve a certain amount of money for the design, that would be fine by my thinking, because we need those designs for those minor projects. To me, $500,000 isn't a minor project, and by definition, it's something this board should consider. And for that reason, I won't be voting in support of this.
Ms. Menace?
Yes, so I wonder, what would it look like if we didn't have these continuing contracts? I'm thinking that maybe it's that you're going to have to, every time a small project comes up, you're going to have to go through that whole process of procuring, services. So it seems like this is a time-efficient way of having approved folks on board so that when you need it, you don't have to spend time making it happen. Is that part of the advantage?
It is, obviously, I refer to this as infrastructure. By having these sources already approved by the board is very similar to having a contract for disaster mitigation companies already approved. Then if you have a situation that comes up, you already have the board's already taken action to approve those sources, and you can just pull from them, and then it won't result in any untimely delays in attending to the services.
I understand my board's concern, and I think that's what I was trying to clarify. And obviously, for the small projects, or if it was under $50,000, you're asking for approval. But I think what's throwing there is the $200,000 for the large projects. Are you saying that up to $200,000 we could pay for an architect without it coming before the board?
No.
Or over 50?
The purchasing policy restricts the superintendent's spending authority to $50,000. So any request to do work and to issue a purchase order to get these services would have to come before the board. But what this does is you've already qualified them, the board's already taken action to award them, and they're already in a pool, and you don't have to go back out and release another RFQ, which is a time-consuming process. You have to advertise it, you have to bring a committee together to evaluate it. We bring it before the board as an individual contract. This just is a way to, it's an alternative to soliciting it every time you need it. It's establishing a pool.
So I understand that, but I think maybe for more security on this issue, so I understand that. So it's going to come before the board. But now I have to ask the follow-up question for transparency. So you have a larger job, you're going to pick an RFQ, but you're going to, are you saying that it will come before the board for a larger project to hire, but how do you pick, so it'll come as an action item, but how are you picking fairly through this group that you've, is it their capabilities? Some do not handle this?
So what we do is we want to distribute the work amongst these sources equitably, and we do our best to do that, but always in the best interest of the district when we do that. Now, what would happen, and this is in the world that I came from before I came here, you have an established pool of architectural and engineering service providers on continuing contract. You have a project that's $300,000, and before that project is put out for bid, the facilities division will bring an AIA contract to the board for approval, and it will outline the scope of services for the design firm. It'll have their fees, their prices, and then you would approve that, let's just say $80,000 in design fees. You're going to see that, and you're going to approve it before we're ever allowed to issue a purchase order.
So I just want to say, I was going to say, this was only making a list to qualify these people.
Yes.
Does that make everyone that they have qualifications?
Dale, can I help?
Please help.
We have it all the time. It's happened many, many, many times where there's an action agenda item for a safety improvement at this school, and all the particulars are there, including the design fee to John Smith Company, who's already been approved via this RFQ. We get a bite of the apple. If we didn't have that in place, if this doesn't get voted in tonight, then what's going to happen is not only do they have to go out and bid out the job to the contractor, they also have to go out and go through the expense and the time-consuming process of bidding out for the design fees. All this does is eliminate that piece. That's all it's doing.
Pre-qualify them.
It's what we're saying is these 4 or 5 vendors, this group of vendors are qualified. We know them. We've done work with them. We've already. So when we have a job, if it's over $50,000, it's going to come to the board. The board gets its bite of the apple. It's just that we don't have to do an RFQ for the architect fees.
Correct.
I hope that helped.
Approval of this would bring the district in compliance with all the requirements of Florida Statute 287.055 on a continuing basis.
So this sentence here, the annual financial impact as estimated by our facilities and planning department is $1 million. Does that mean the board, to me, that means the board, I will be deciding whether or not to cast a vote to spend $1 million, whereas earlier today, we've asked, some hard, to look at some hard things to fill our healthcare fund in, almost like $800,000, I think we have to find. So we're agreeing to spend $1 million.
The only way you're agreeing to spend $1 million on design fees and not have a vote every time is if every one of those jobs was under the superintendent's authority, and every one of those jobs never came to the board. It'd have to be a whole lot of $35,000 jobs in a year. The $1 million is an estimate of projects we've got, what's on the 5-year capital
least
plan,
20.
what do we think is going to happen. Remember, anything over $50,000 is going to come to the board.
So, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
So then, Mr. Morrison, is the $1 million encumbered after this vote?
No, sir. That $1 million is only informational, it's not encumbered.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. All right. Thank you so much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? 5-0, Ms. Stang. Item D, approval of the Equal Opportunity Schools contract.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With item D, we're seeking approval to contract with Equal Opportunity Schools to work with our 2 comprehensive high schools to increase the number of and success of minority students in advanced coursework. Total cost for this contract is $48,800 plus travel. Right now, that sits below the $50,000 threshold. With travel, it's estimated to go above $50,000, so that's why we're bringing it to you for your approval. I did contact the company, and it appears that travel could be anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 annually. So the maximum cost for this would be $58,800. This is in line with our initiative to improve academic achievement for our African-American students. This is something that the high schools are very excited about doing. We have not been able to successfully increase the number of students and the success of those students, minority students, in our advanced coursework on our own. This company has a proven track record of getting it done all across the country.
Now to call for a motion.
Move approval?
Thank you, Ms. Jimenez.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Frost. Ms. Jimenez, on your motion?
Yes, I'm just very glad to see this on the agenda. As many of you know, in the community, the school district is still under a desegregation order, and we are working hard to close the achievement gap for our African-American students. And what I like about this plan that we have, and this is only a small piece, of course, of a lot of work that needs to be done, is that the goal is not only to close the participation gap, but it's to support those students once they are in these classes, and to also work to develop systems to sustain that improvement. So I think it's realistic. I think it's exactly what the school district needs to be doing. We've spent too many years saying that we shouldn't focus on any specific group of students, even if we're under DSEG. So I am glad to support this item, and my only little pet peeve on this was that I don't think we upgrade students. I think that we want them to be successful, but I know that that's just the language that was used in the original contract. So I will be supporting this.
Mr. Frost?
Thank you. And everything Ms. Menes just said, and I have one question. This $48,800 plus travel, roughly $58,000, will not come out of the $80,000 we're setting aside in the upcoming budget?
That is correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion? I just wanted to mention, in my discussions when researching this item, I think it would be noteworthy for the superintendent, because one of my questions were, when I was reading some of the duties of this outside group coming in, saying these are some of the things we should be doing, maybe we don't know how to do it, and I think you had clarified that this is a group that will come in and evaluate us, but this is not a long-term employment of this
The idea would be that they show us how to do these things, and then we do it on our own in the future. Yes, ma'am. That we adopt these best practices. After we're trained in these best practices, we adopt these as how we do things, so we won't need their assistance in the future.
So that's a great goal, thank you.
So it's a train-the-trainer scenario? Roughly.
Sort of.
Okay.
Help us get it right.
And it's 2 years then, 2016, 2018?
It depends on how well we're doing at the end of the first year. The study we do follow-up next year to see how the students are doing.
And then just a follow-up, and we're going to make sure that, unlike the issues we had with the firm that we're working for DSEG, where there were issues with getting data and things to them in a timely manner, that as we do this work, we will make sure that things are done.
Yeah, in fact, they collect most of their data when they're here.
No further? Mr. Searcy?
Have we ever used this group before, or
Have I ever used this
have we
group?
ever used the group?
No, we have never used this group.
I noticed out of Seattle, we couldn't find anybody closer to home.
There isn't anybody that I'm aware of that does this as well as this group, and they have a pretty strong national reputation. The state of Florida was actually looking to do this statewide and decided to give the districts the opportunity to do it on their own.
Or to pay for it on their own,
That's correct.
please.
Fund it yourself.
That is correct.
No further? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0 staying. Item E, approval of the agreement between Consultant Healthcare and School District of Indian River County for 2016 to 2018. Dr. Rideau.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item E does not cost the district any money. Approval for this, we're seeking approval for an agreement with Consulate Healthcare that allows us to place our students in their facility to conduct their clinical experience as part of their healthcare education program.
Move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Frost. Thank you, Ms. Jimenez. Mr. Frost, on your motion?
I just think it's great that we're providing career and technical and partnering with the business community. It's a win-win. They get the experience as well as some labor.
Thank you. Ms. Jimenez. Any further? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? 5-0. Ms. Stang. Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've asked Mr. Green and his department to prepare a presentation for you on our school grades. We did receive our school grades just a short time ago. He's going to try to run through the presentation as quickly as he can. One of the things that he's going to cover is not just the results, but how the results were calculated. Once again, this year, the Florida Department of Education made changes to the formula that is used to calculate school grades. Unfortunately, what we've seen over the last 18 years or so that we've had school grades in Florida is each time that the state adjusts or make changes to the formula, typically we see statewide a decline in overall grades. And again, that's what we saw this year. One of the things that I shared an article with you from the Orlando area newspaper that the prediction was that there were going to be fewer A schools, that grades overall across the state were going to be lower, and that was realized. The changes to the grading formula, the biggest change was in how learning gains were calculated. You may remember that the grades we received in about January of this year for 14-15, for the 14-15 school year, the grades we received for the schools for that school year did not include learning gains because last year was the first year we had the new FSA assessment. This year was the second year that we had the FSA assessment, so they could calculate learning gains. However, they changed the formula or the way in which you could earn points for learning gains, and it did have an impact on some of our school grades. And I'll let Mr. Green take it from here.
Thank you, Dr. Rendell and board members. Board members, you should have a copy in front of you of the presentation. There are some limited copies with Ms. Stang. If there's I think we have 10 or 12 copies that we can share with the audience. I'll run through it briefly, but just to give you a little history and the community as a whole on the school grading system. School grades started in Florida in 1999 as part of the A+ plan. And this is certainly not an exhaustive list, but it's just an example that as over time, in 1999, they coined the term raising the bar, and that was the continuous changes to the accountability model to increase proficiency and performance for students. So you can see it used to be only at 3 grade levels. It's 2001 and went to grades 3 through 10. Later they included learning gains. Then they included all students, students with disabilities, English language learners. They included science, learning gains of the lowest 25%, of students, retakes on the assessment, graduation rates. In 2012, we switched tests from FCAT 1.0 to FCAT 2.0, added Algebra 1 EOC. You can see over the next few years, we've added additional EOC or end-of-course assessments in those courses such as biology, geometry, and U.S. history. But in 2015, there was a major overhaul to the system because there had become a lot of complicated language had got included in how to calculate the grade. Those were addressed, and learning gains were changed in statute. So in 2014-15, 2 years ago, there was a push to simplify the calculation. So no more bonus points for certain things, no more penalties that may lower a grade, and no safety nets that may prevent a school from dropping more than 1 letter grade. Those were all removed from the formula. So whatever grade you earned on the points, that's the grade that will be published for you. As well, there was a requirement to test 95% of your students to earn an A and 90% of your students to even get a grade published. That has been changed, and you must now test 95% of all eligible students just in order to receive a grade. As well, in 2014-15, we implemented the new Florida Standards Assessment as part of the accountability system, so another change in the assessment for the majority of grades. And there were changes in the way learning gains were calculated. They're more rigorous now, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But for 2014-15, it's very important to note that none of the learning gain components were included because they couldn't calculate the gain between the two different assessments, FCAT 1 or 2.0 and the Florida Standards Assessment. So although in law, they didn't have data to report it, so it was absent of the formula. And then finally, they changed the grading scale. It used to be you had to earn 525 points out of 800 to earn an A at elementary. Now they've changed it to a percent model. So you can see the percentages of points you need to earn. For example, an A, you need to earn 62 to 100% of all the possible points, and that's consistent across elementary, middle, and high school now, where it used to be different and was based on points. So changing the grading scale, changing the formula, and changing the learning gains, and changing the assessment all contributed to a much different set of criteria for calculating school grades this year in 2016. So learning gains. Students are now considered to have met the criteria for making a learning gain if they meet one of the following criteria. If they move up any achievement level, that's the same as the past. So if you go from a 1 to a 2, 2 to a 3, 3 to a 4, any level, you make a gain. What's new is for those students who stay the same level, if you stay a 1 or a 2, you must now move up a sub-level within that group. There's 3 sub-levels within a level 1, and there are 2 sub-levels within a level 2. And the points required to move a sub-level are more than the points required previously to make a learning gain within a level 1 or 2. And I'll show you why, what the rationale behind that is. As well, within a level 3 and 4, previously, as long as you stayed a 3, you counted as a learning gain. Now, if you stay a 3 or a 4, you have to go up at least 1 point within that level. Previously, you could have been a 3 and dropped some points, but stayed a 3. You were counted as a learning gain because you stayed a 3 or proficient. Now, staying within that 3 or 4, you must also increase at least 1 point. And then finally, maintaining a level 5, that is the same as the previously. It doesn't matter what you score within the 5. As long as you maintain the highest level 5, you're counted as a learning gain. So what was the rationale behind the change in learning gain? Previously, and I've shared this with the board on numerous occasions, you could start out in 3rd grade as a level 1 student. You could make the minimum learning gains required, and by 10th grade, you would still be a level 1. The learning gains did not move you to proficiency if you made the minimum amounts each year. The new model, as you see, will move you up level 1 through a low, middle, and high. Those are the 3 sub-levels. Then through a low and high at level 2. Those are the 2 sub-levels, with the goal that if you make the minimum learning gains under the new system every year, by 8th grade you would reach proficiency, where before you would still be at a level 1 even in 10th grade. So it's a more rigorous requirement, but the goal is to get students to grade level before they graduate. So the current formula is now based on achievement, or the percent of students scoring 3 and above in the core subject areas, learning gains, which we just talked about, learning gains for all students, and learning gains for the lowest 25% of the students, graduation rate. Graduation rate is now based on a year-old data because they are releasing all the school grades in the summer. No longer do we have to wait till almost January to get high school grades. Now they release them in the summer, but what that forces them to do is use 2-year-old graduation rate data. And acceleration, or students who are taking high school courses in middle school, passing industry certifications. Those are the 4 key areas that are included in the school grade formula. So for elementary, 3 achievement areas is all that counted in 14-15, 300 possible points. Now in 15-16, learning gains have been reinstated. It's now based on 700 possible points. So when you look at the grades and you see a school that may have went up or down, we can't necessarily equate that to performance because the number of points have changed for elementary in their requirements. At middle school, you will see there were 4 achievement levels: language arts, math, science, and social studies, 4 achievement areas, also an acceleration area. And this year, the 4 learning gain components have been added back. So from 400 points, now to 900 total points in 15-16. High schools, again, they had the 4 achievement level areas. They had a graduation rate success and an acceleration success. On top of those 600 points, the 4 learning gain areas have been added back again for a total of 1,000 points in 2016. The district grading model has all of the components, as you can imagine, the 4 achievement levels in each core area, the graduation rate, and separately the acceleration rate of middle schools, 100 points, and the acceleration of students at high school, 100 points, and the 4 learning gain components have been added back for a total of 1,100 points at the district level. So just taking a look at our elementary school grades, again, we are showing whether the grade is up, down, or the same. We are not drawing a conclusion from that the school dropped in performance or gained in performance, because it's 2 totally different scales with a different amount of points, and now it includes learning gains. But it is a comparison of the grades, the majority of the grades staying the same at elementary school, 3 school grades being higher and 3 school grades being lower. We're still waiting for St. Peter's Academy. If you have tests less than 95% or have other issues, the state works through those and we go through an appeal process. So we're still waiting for their grade to be posted if it is going to be. Secondary schools, as well as the district grade, you can see that the impact caused most grades to go down. Again, not necessarily based on performance, but a different formula, and the district grade from an A to a B. These are the 700 components for the elementary schools. Each of those components represent the percentage of students. For example, Beachland, the ELA achievement, that means 60% of the students scored level 3 or above. They earned 60 out of the 100 possible points. So this just shows you in all of the component areas how each school scored and how many points they earned. And again, if they earned 62% of the possible points, they would earn an A. For our middle schools, again, these are the components, including social studies and acceleration. Social studies, EOC. Civics, EOC, yeah. And acceleration of those students taking high school courses or passing industry certifications. And for our high schools, these are the component areas and how each school scored in each of those component areas. The district also receives a grade. Again, it's on all 11 components, and that's the breakdown of how we scored in each of the areas. We cannot compare learning gains from year to year because in 2014-15 they didn't report learning gains, but we can compare proficiencies. So here what you will notice is in 2015, the proficiency rate in English language arts for each school, elementary school, versus 2016, and math on the right. What you'll notice is the majority of schools earned less points in ELA proficiency from 15 to 16, while the majority of schools earned more points in math proficiency from 15 to 16. For our secondary schools, middle and high schools, and just to wrap up, this is only the second year using the new Florida Standards Assessment, which we didn't really get the achievement levels until about this last January for schools to actually start having actionable data. You can't really compare the school grades from 2014, 15, or 16. Each year is based on a totally different set of criteria, so you really have to drill down to the individual student performance. The Learning Gains now has an increased rigor in its formula to move students to proficiency. And just as an example, if we were not to have had learning gains included again, if they would have left the 4 learning gain components out of the school grade this year, one school would have received a lower grade, so learning gains helped them. 14 schools would have received the same grades, so it made no difference. And 8 of our schools would have received a higher grade if there were no learning gains. So learning gains being included actually hurt their overall grade because of the new increased criteria for making a learning gain. Traditionally, in the past, learning gains have benefited our schools greatly in all components, but that increased formula to move students to proficiency sooner actually had a negative effect at 8 of our schools. And a few great celebrations. Treasure Coast increased from a C to a B, Fellsmere Elementary from a D to a C, and Indian River Academy from an F to a C.
We also had Citrus move from a D to a C.
And that's, any questions? Just wanted to give you an update and an overview of where we were at with that data.
If you could leave that screen up for just a second, a couple points to note. When we looked at how the learning gains actually hurt 8 of the schools, in other words, they would have received a higher grade if learning gains weren't calculated, what we're seeing is a lot of the learning gains not being realized in the 3s and 4s. In the past, if you were a 3 and you maintained a level 3, you counted it as a learning gain. Even if you slipped from the top of level 3 to the bottom of level 3, you still counted it as a learning gain. So, that's an area where we kind of got a hint that that might be happening last year when we created the school report card that had the 10 different areas, and one of the areas we looked at was VAM, or growth, the growth measure. If you remember, we pointed out a couple A schools that were below expectations on VAM. In other words, the schools were, the students at those schools were scoring proficient on a lot of these measures, but they weren't showing growth. And now to get learning gains, to show growth component, we're going to have to see growth. So that's an area that we have to make sure that we're not only taking care of the level 1s and the level 2s and trying to help them reach proficiency, but the students who are already proficient, we're going to have to help them grow. They can't just maintain proficiency. One of the other points that didn't come out in the report here, but I did mention it to you in an email, but those in the public may not know, another area that the way the grade is calculated that it was changed for this year is for the high schools. They used to be able to bank, so to speak, the scores of their students who took an EOC in middle school. A lot of our students take algebra in middle school or geometry in middle school. That means that they won't be taking algebra or geometry in high school. So those students won't be taking that EOC in the high school, so the high school doesn't have the benefit of having, a top math student calculate into their score at all. So in the past, those students' scores were brought with them, so to speak, to the high school. They counted as proficient or passing the EOC in middle school, and then when they got to the high school got the benefit of having a student who had passed an algebra EOC or a geometry EOC in middle school. Well, because those students aren't taking those assessments at the middle school, at the high schools, the state just removed that banking of those points or those scores. So the math scores at the high schools reflect students who have taken math EOCs at the high schools, and that's it. Not anybody who, those accelerated math students who took these accelerated courses in middle school now don't benefit the high schools at all. So in some ways, that's a huge negative for the high schools. We want students who are capable of taking accelerated courses in middle school to take them. The problem is those kids cannot then basically help their high school in the areas of math because they'll have exhausted their EOCs that count towards a school grade by then. So that's something that didn't show up in the report, but it definitely showed up in the scores for the two comprehensive high schools and even Indian River Charter.
Dr. Rendell, one other issue I failed to mention. Dodgertown Elementary was extremely close to the next letter grade of a C. We've met with Ms. Tetro and gone through the data with a fine-tooth comb down to every student, and there are some retained third-grade students who had proficient scores who the state counted in learning gains for all but did not count in learning gains for the lowest quartile. So we are preparing a school grade appeal for Dodgertown Elementary. We don't know if it'll be enough to move them up a letter grade, but we certainly want to make sure their grade is reflective of the most accurate data.
his,
Just one thing, he mentioned VAM, and I don't know that you said exactly what that was, but somebody might want to know.
So I'll take a shot at explaining it, and then we'll see if Mr. Green or Mr. Taylor or somebody else wants to take a shot. Mr. Taylor's not here. VAM is the value-added model. Basically, the state looks at a student's performance on these standardized assessments from year to year and sets a predictive score for that student. If that student has scored at 315 points in third grade and 315 points in fourth grade, then they expect that student to score at 315 points in fifth grade. So whether that student reaches that point level or not, it is whether they've met their expected growth. And so then you look at the number of students at that school who have met their expected growth or not, and you can tell whether we have met the targeted growth model. Mr. Green, how much did I butcher that?
No, that was perfect. The only thing I will add is each student's predicted score is based on how all the other students, based on 10 components that are very like them, their mobility rate, their retention rate, what grade. So how other kids performed also goes into the prediction for that student, and some students might have a 2-point gain and some might have a 200-point gain. It's tailored individually to the unique student.
My only point was the VAM, V-A-M.
Acronym,
and
yes,
what
sir.
it stood for. That was the point.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So Dr. Rendell, and I would like to amend you, you are correct. Citrus, if you could update your presentation, was a C, a D to a C. And
Correct.
I believe that's reported as a C and a C in the presentation.
One more bit of news with these grades. The board may remember several years ago there was a thing called the Opportunity Scholarship Program. If a school had scored a D, had received a grade of D for 3 years in a row, or if a school was given the grade of an F, students from that school in the following year could attend other district schools. We did that several years ago here and across the state. Well, as we switched to the FSA, to the new assessment, that Opportunity Scholarship Program was suspended for 2 years. It is now in place for this coming year. So we do have one school that received a grade of an F, that's Vero Beach Elementary, and right now Dodgertown has 3 Ds. So tomorrow we're actually going to send letters out to the families of students attending those schools with their instructions for the opportunity for them to attend a couple of the other schools in our district that are Cs or higher. That's something we did several years ago. We do provide transportation for that. Typically, you don't see a lot of movement, but it is something that by statute we have to offer. The Opportunity Scholarship was reinstated for this year.
is that it?
That's it.
There's no discussion items, school board matters. We'll start with Mr. Searcy. Mr. McCain?
Thank you.
Ms. Menace?
Just briefly, I want to thank the superintendent for placing this item during our board meeting. I think this is really important information for our community to know. So thank you for doing that.
Mr. Frost?
No, ma'am.
And none for me. So with that being said, this meeting is adjourned.